3% global birth rate. It is the end of the West is already here. And you have to ask yourself, why does the establishment want to bring down Western ideas and Western culture? Because the Renaissance, true liberalism, is diametrically opposed to the corporate board transhumanist takeover that is taking place now. And true eugenics is not just targeting the infirm, the weak, the addled, the stupid, the obsolete, as they call people. Its true mission is to target anyone and everyone that would have free ideas and be empowered individuals, to quote the Pentagon and their Jade Helm documents, to end free will and the spark of human creativity. And that's why I'm fundamentally against a tribal racist response to the tribal racist synthetic program to destroy Western civilization.
You knew this day would come.
Because that is the proper primitive response, is to racially align, to defend against an attempt at extermination. The problem is the directed program is only one division of a larger profile attack against all humans on the planet to end the species as we know it. By the technocrats who believe they are a new super species, the ultimate supremacist. So we're taking you behind the scenes here, into the secrets of the New World Order, down the rabbit hole, the keys to freedom. So, David Duke is going to be joining us in the second hour, and it may even go into the third hour if he wants to stay. I am not here to get in a mindless fight with David Duke. In fact, I've tried to get the leaders of Mecha and La Raza on this show, and I want to see if Nico can try to do that again. I haven't tried that in a few years, and they won't do it. And I want to get up here and read where Mecha says, for those in the race, everything, for those outside the race, nothing. And then La Raza means the race. And I remember the mayor, before he left office, Gus Garcia in Austin, got up, we played the video with a bizarre proclamation that Hispanics are the supreme race of aliens created by genetic engineers, which is a whole weird Aztec cult thing that's real popular. I mean, this is some fruity stuff. Who knows? The world's so weird, maybe it's true. The point is, massive racism, tribalism is spewed by mainstream television and media. It's spewed by the majority, minority leader groups, and it's standard. And so if you're intellectually honest, I don't like the Ku Klux Klan. I don't like grown men that dress up in outfits and give themselves names like Grand Dragon and Cyclopsian Ruler. One time a Klan member at a demonstration I was protesting up in Waco came over and gave me a card and it said Cyclopsian Ruler. I'm not to digress. Just I quit, dressing up as a superhero when I was about 5.
It's too dangerous to get me close.
But how do you sit there and criticize the Klan when the Hispanic groups sound like the Klan or the black groups? I mean, if the Klan was surrounding black people's cars and going in restaurants to black people and getting in their face, it would be a big national news story. But when it's done, directed by the White House and George Soros, it's cutesy and fun. But I don't want to just sit here and pick sides in all this. That's what they want us to do, to balkanize. I want to transcend it. That just means pull back from it and just look at the spectacle that's being created in this country. And I'm going to bring it up to Duke. I know we're based on tribalism. I know racism is inherent. It's just a name for tribalism. If you didn't have tribalism in ancient times, you'd be destroyed. It is a survival mechanism. But in this modern age, we're sold, don't be tribal. Then the West, driven by Christians, stops being tribal, tries to end tribalism, and then elites in the West double-cross, hype up tribalism worldwide, end it in the West, and then eradicate the West. which everyone's trying to get into because it is the most advanced, it is the most cultured. That doesn't mean it doesn't have big problems. I mean, I just want to build up Africa and Latin America. I want to be able to travel anywhere in the world and it'd be safe and happy and fun and magnify the best aspects of those cultures. I'm somebody who's so confident about myself and my family and what I believe that I don't need to look down on people to feel good about myself. I want to empower people. I'm a classic bleeding heart liberal. They call that an ultra-right-wing fascist today. These terms mean nothing they use. Thomas Jefferson was a liberal, as I've said 1,000 times. These people are not. They are a cult attacking language. I mean, look at the stack of news I'm going to get to just on this subject just today. Yale professor, students leaving campus over racist word master. They're now talking about getting rid of the term masters in swimming and in golf. I mean, all that means is you've won championships. You are a master. A master means, but because someone used that term in slavery, it's now banned. And they're now moving at Harvard, Yale to ban it. Biggest gay lobby today in America urges schools to ban the words boys and girls. This is an attack on the species, on procreation, which they said they would do. It has nothing to do with, what some person's sexual preference is. It's about, I mean, imagine if you told somebody 20 years ago they'll ban the name boy and girl. Imagine a science fiction movie where it's, I mean, this is freakish. Danish politician convicted of racism for offending Muslims. All he did was criticize ISIS. That's on Infowars.com. Black Site, The Root, attacks Ice Cube, calling him misogynistic for being pro-Second Amendment. I mean, it's just, it's a cult of just 1984 weirdos. Monday through Friday from 11 a.m. till 2 p.m. Central, we're here, live. Joining us tomorrow is the niece of Martin Luther King, Dr. Alveda King, on the whole abortuary situation that is on record targeting black people, aborting 50+% of those before they're even born. I'm going to be asking David Duke what he thinks about that when he joins us coming up in the second hour. How is it the left is targeting black people on record, but then also using political correctness to try to end free speech? I'm going to ask him how he squares that up when I debate David Duke coming up the next hour. Now, joining us now is an extremely informed individual that we've had on before, and I appreciate him joining us. Michael Maloof writes for WND.com, WorldNet Daily. He specializes in international political and economic analysis. Former senior security policy analyst in the Office of the Secretary of Defense. Maloof has almost 30 years of federal service, 23 of which he was in the Department of Defense. And I'm not going to go over all the stuff he was involved in special operations, secret operations, all the rest of it, the best-selling books he's written. We've got him for a limited period of time, but I want to get him on for a full 45 minutes sometime on the nightly news to really walk through all this. But he wrote a story a few weeks ago that got a lot of attention. Ex-DIA chief, former general, says Obama willfully allowed rise of ISIS. And before we go to Mr. Maloof, I want to play a clip of this. In September, General Thomas McEnery admitted the United States helped build ISIS as a result of the Obama administration's backing some of the wrong people. But now there's been more admissions to all of this. Let's go ahead and play that clip.
For the sake of our viewers, in 2012, your agency was saying, quote, the Salafists, the Muslim Brotherhood, and Al-Qaeda in Iraq are the major forces driving the insurgency in Syria. In 2012, the US was helping coordinate arms transfers to those same groups. Why did you not stop that if you're worried about the rise of quote-unquote...
I hate to say it's not my job. My job was to ensure that the accuracy of our intelligence that was being presented was as good as it could be. And I will tell you, it goes before 2012. I mean, when we were in Iraq, and we still had decisions to be made before there was a decision to pull out of Iraq in 2011. I mean, it was very clear what we were going to face.
Well, I admire your frankness.
Very clear what we were going to face.
Let me just take one before we move on, just to clarify once more. You're basically saying that even in government at the time, you knew those groups were around, you saw this analysis, and you were arguing against it. But who wasn't listening?
I think the administration.
So the administration turned a blind eye to your analysis.
I don't know if they turned a blind eye. I think it was a decision. I think it was a willful decision.
A willful decision to go support an insurgency that had Salafist, Al-Qaeda, and
a
Muslim
willful
Brotherhood.
decision to do what they're doing, which you have to really ask the president, what is it that he actually is doing with the policy that is in place, because it is very, very confusing. I'm sitting here today, Mehdi, and I can't tell you exactly what that is, and I've been at this for a long time.
Okay, well, let's go back to Iraq.
And that's General Michael T. Flynn, another general, basically saying the same thing. And the full article is in Joseph Ferris G2 Bulletin, WND.com. Ex-DIA chief Obama willfully allowed rise of ISIS. Our guest Skype dropped. Do we have him back? Fantastic, thank you. So ex-DIA chief Obama willfully allowed the rise of ISIS. Now, I know our audience knows this, but this is not getting out in the media. 2.5 years ago, it did get out, and our own military said we're not going to be part of being Al-Qaeda's Air Force. They changed the name to ISIS. They're trying to overthrow African countries. They've taken over Libya. They tried to take over. We're partially successful in Egypt. Saudi Arabia is backing them. Joining us to talk about the rest of the story is F. Michael Maloof. Thank you for coming on.
The best right now, but I will do my best.
All right, well, thank you. I mean, how does the Obama administration think they can get away with this?
Well, they have been. They've been doing it for years. They've known about this for quite some time, and it goes back even to the period of the Bush administration when we were supporting the jihadists to try to unseat the Shia influence in the Middle East. And it's just proliferated now, as General Flynn points out, that the idea was not, the rise of ISIS didn't occur just because we pulled out, but the reality is we were supporting jihadi groups to unseat and overthrow Assad. And by giving them arms and what have you over a period of time, and the Free Syrian Army, they dissipated and they became part of the jihadist groups. And as we saw in Afghanistan with the creation of the Mujahideen, it spread, and also the weapons spreading that we supported among Muslims in the period of Bosnia, when we were in Bosnia. That helped create, and today that now forms a major threat to Europe.
What is the strategy by the different camps in Washington to openly turn loose the most radical, vicious forms of Islam? What is the in-game strategy here?
I'm sorry, Alex, I'm not hearing you.
I understand we're having some Skype problems connecting with you.
We can go on the phone, perhaps.
Yeah, we'll probably have to keep you on Skype, but also have you patch in via the phone. We're going to work on that right now with our guest today. Again, though, I understand that our audience is aware of this. I understand that our audience knows this, but the general public is ignorant on these facts. And now we have two high-level, recently retired generals, one of them who headed up the Defense Intelligence Agency, saying we followed orders to build up this group and basically create it. And we know that the rebels are ISIS, Al-Qaeda people. So again, understand when ISIS has blowback and attacks this country, it's not going to be on the news that our government helped create it. And again, most people in the government don't like the fact that this is going on. The larger strategy, and I'll get Maloof's take on as soon as we get connected to him via some audio, is to destabilize the Middle East, keep them in turmoil fighting with each other, balkanization, divide and conquer, and then use the threat that grows in those unstable states to menace Europe, menace Africa, menace Asia, menace the United States and Canada, Australia, New Zealand, so that that threat can then be used to set up the police state here domestically, which has already been done. And for me, this is the big central issue that we're dealing with on this front. Now, while we work on getting the guest on with us today, I wanted to just take some time out to remind viewers and listeners that InfoWars funds about 70% of itself outside sponsors, and that's a very good thing because it allows us to really make sure that what we're promoting and what we're pushing and selling is of the highest quality. And I've set out now the 15 different products at InfoWarsLife.com to bring you the very best products out there. And we have a special that we ran for about a week, but it made us sell out of almost all of it. And I didn't want to sell out of colloidal silver, so we stopped the sale 2 weeks ago. We got more in, so I'm bringing the most successful sale we've ever had of silver back. It's time to get prepared. For a limited time, get our Silver Bullet colloidal silver for an impressive 30% off at InfoWarsLife.com. Silver Bullet is concentrated to a powerful 30 parts per million. It is based on deionized water and stores for years. I decided to run this special to help you stock up on Silver Bullet. We're prepared to supply at the lowest price out there, whether it's economic meltdown or any other collapse. Experts admit colloidal silver is essential to have on hand. Silver Bullet is again 30% off while supplies last at InfoWarsLife.com. And that's 30% off the $19.95 price. It's already one of the lowest prices out there, so that's just an insanely good special. Rod in Nacogdoches, Texas had this to say: when the country comes unraveled, forget finding a doctor. Well, unless you can trade a chicken for a visit. I believe in staying healthy because you don't want to go down in a crisis situation. This should be a staple you're preparing the stockpile. Thank you, Rod, for that good point. You're absolutely right on that front. Here's Patriot Horn in Crossville, Tennessee. This colloidal silver, in my opinion, is the best one on the market, or at least the best I have been able to find. Its parts per million are the best I should find for the price. I stand with this product because it truly works and does some amazing things. My wife and I almost never get sick. If we feel anything coming on, we double up on the silver and have beat it every time and stopped it in its tracks. Thank you so much for Patriot Horn in Crossville, Tennessee. And I'll tell you, it comes from the biggest top laboratory in the country that's normally $25 to $29. It's private labeled under several other big names, sold by the biggest healthy food store in the country. We just private label it and discount it. It's Silver Bullet colloidal silver. You can go down in parts per million. I mean, you can have 100 parts per million, but it gets toxic at that level, according to the experts we've talked to. So 30 parts per million, we believe, is the best formula. InfoWarsLife.com, 30% off Silver Bullet for a limited time, and InfoWarsStore.com is the big blanket site. Okay, going back to the defense expert working in the Pentagon for 30 years, Mr. Maloof, writing for WorldNet Daily. We'll have to abbreviate this interview and have him back up next week for a longer, in-depth interview and to take calls. I was getting into the fact, who are the elements in Washington that want to turn loose a Saudi Arabian takeover jihad? What is the end game? What are the people pushing this thinking they're doing? What happens when there's ISIS blowback in the West, Mr. Maloof?
Yeah, well, it's the administration itself at the highest levels on the national security team. As you know, Obama's been very supportive of the Saudis. He upset them greatly by not backing Mubarak at a critical time that he needed him, and we see it even today. The Saudis have have announced that they plan to go on their own independent route. But this problem has been brewing for quite some time. This administration sought to placate the Saudis very early on in backing these jihadi groups to try to out Assad, and at the same time to put pressure on al-Maliki, who was clearly Shia, in order to convince him to bring in more Sunni participation. But you had them supporting constantly the Sunnis, not only in Syria, but then that had an overflow into Iraq. And General Flynn saw very early on that by supporting the Sunnis in Syria, there would be the potential for setting up a caliphate, or a principality as it's called, inside of Iraq as well. And they predicted that 2 years before the administration expressed astonishment and surprise that ISIS had built up the way that they had. But it was all calculated as whether it's like one of those things that we create this monster and then the monster turns on us. And that's precisely what happened after Afghanistan. It happened again after Bosnia. By giving them the arms, we basically supported them, and including the Free Syrian Army. We had major programs underway to provide arms to the Free Syrian Army. Most of them today, and I talked to General Vallee about this. He says, for all intents and purposes, they've gone to ISIS and to other jihadi groups today as a consequence.
Mr. Malouf, you've got the contacts inside D.C. I talk to a lot of people that are currently officers in the military. They say this is one of the worst morale events they've ever seen. It's killing recruitment. It's really making people fundamentally question, is this government pure evil at the top? We know 2 years ago the military said no to being Al-Qaeda's Air Force, famously with Rand Paul and Ted Cruz and chairman of the Joint Chiefs at the time, Dempsey. But again, pulling back from this, I don't see how the Obama administration thought they would get away. I guess they have gotten away with actually trying to turn Al-Qaeda loose and then having its name changed to ISIS. I mean, the military obviously is speaking out when you've got two recently retired generals coming out saying they were ordered to do this. You know, the administration's behind it. So if we're seeing that on the surface, what's going on beneath the surface in the military top down?
Well, the military is demoralized, as you point out. This was not an intelligence failure. The intelligence was spot on this projection that this is what's going to happen if you take this course of action. And as General Flynn pointed out, it was a willful decision to ignore that intelligence and proceed with the policy approach of supporting these jihadists. It's one of these deals where the administration lost control of them. You had Bandar going in and providing arms and what have you to jihadi groups out of Saudi Arabia. And they still finance them to this day. And it wasn't just Saudi Arabia, it was UAE and Qatar and all of the other Sunni groups that are trying to break up that Shia crescent, as they describe it. Look, it's not, Iran has its problems, but it's not the one that's supporting these jihadi groups going around killing people, beheading them, setting up these sex slave systems, and now supporting ISIS, which is now threatening the U.S., Saudi Arabia, it's Sunnis. And this is, I don't know how you get a handle on this at this point, but it is out of control. And this administration is totally oblivious to it.
I've studied history, but I didn't work in secret operations like you did for 30 years. But I've certainly interviewed hundreds of experts. I've studied it. Am I wrong in saying this is the most bold, out of control, fund the bad guys, dirty action that I've ever seen? And then it doesn't even bring down Iran and the mullahs, the corrupt Shiites. It seems to actually embolden them and make them look like good guys in the region. It just seems like a horrible move, even from a Machiavellian perspective. But America isn't supposed to do Machiavellian things, but it's beyond Machiavellian. It seems like, and I hear this 7-8 years ago when he was running and didn't believe it. It seems like Obama may actually be either in a power play or spiritually aligned with the radical Wahhabis, and that this is a imperial power play to take over the Middle East. And Obama's over there bowing down to the Saudi kings. I mean, I hate to say it, but the only way this makes sense is that the president and some of the neocons even, who we know hang out over there, have secretly converted to Wahhabism.
Well, that's the problem. They basically are now supporting the Saudis, and because they perceive the enemy to be Iran, and we've seen that kind of discussion going on as a result of the nuclear agreement and all the discussion that has surrounded that. But this has emboldened Obama to continue this. I think what's happened is that they probably began to put the brakes on a little bit, but it was too late. It has gotten out of control. These guys have come into their own. They're able to get weapons. They're heavily financed as a result of the oil stuff that they've been able to acquire. And now even the Saudis in recent days have tried to team up with Moscow to no longer, and with Syria, to actually be a go-between with Syria to no longer try to topple Assad, but try to offset ISIS's influence. I mean, the whole thing is just turned around again.
So ISIS is even double-crossing Saudi Arabia.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. You see, Saudi Arabia was supporting ISIS so that they wouldn't attack Saudi Arabia, but that's no longer valid. I mean, now they do have eyes on Mecca and Medina, and they used to be able to pay bribes. One of the princes would go over to pay off Al Qaeda years ago not to invade Saudi Arabia. But now ISIS has become so big. I mean, I've written other stories that suggest that by taking down northern Africa, they're and laying groundwork in Libya, this is forming the basis now for a takeover of all of the African continent. They are spreading like wildfire, and they're acting very independently, although they swear allegiance to al-Baghdadi and to ISIS. But he's basically allowing these groups to do their thing, and that's what we're seeing today. And now it's out of control. When I asked the Defense Department recently at a press interview, what is our policy toward these other groups that are forming and swearing allegiance, they said our focus is only on Iraq and Syria. Well, that focus clearly is too little, too late.
Well, I was against going into Iraq because I thought it would stir up radical elements and actually make them the underdog and victims and would empower radical elements of Islam. I'm no rocket scientist, but I think, we see that's the case. Yeah. But now all over Europe, they're arresting members of parliaments, city council people. If they say radical Islam has to be dealt with, it's like the Nazis, which I think it is, then they're arresting people. They're fining people. And so there's this bizarre alliance with the socialist communist left in the United States. And I see feminists promoting Islam like it's a cultural thing to put bags on women's heads and radical Islam and not let them drive cars and sexually mutilate them. But then if I wear pants and I'm a man, that inherently is bad, but then radical Islam is good. This seems like the West is trying to commit suicide.
Well, this is a problem that has gotten out of control, and we need to put it back into, I don't know how you put that genie back into the bottle at this point, except to prepare for the worst.
Well, you were a Pentagon analyst. What do you think is going to end up happening now that ISIS, I mean, we went from Al-Qaeda being basically disabled and falling apart to now ISIS, 10 times bigger than Al-Qaeda, 20 times?
Oh, yeah, they're spreading like crazy. I see them spreading into Caucasus. In fact, I was talking to some of my contacts in the country of Georgia, and they're getting a lot of recruits out of there now. That's a Christian country, predominantly an Eastern Orthodox country. And a lot of the leadership today of ISIS, the top military strategist for ISIS today is a Georgian. But he's Muslim. He's out of the Pankisi Gorge. Now you have it spreading in clearly into South Asia, and particularly Pakistan. I did a story recently quoting one of my very discreet sources in Afghanistan, part of our U.S. military. He basically told me that Pakistani ISI, Inter-Service Intelligence Directorate, is now funding ISIS in Afghanistan. In addition to the Taliban, and the Taliban, because now that Omar is dead, they're now switching allegiance to ISIS. So this thing is just accumulating like a snowball going down.
Sure. What is the White House going to do when there's more ISIS attacks? We've already had 2. What are they going to do when there's bigger ISIS attacks? I think undoubtedly it's going to happen in Europe or here at least. I mean, how are they going to spin that?
Well, I think Obama basically has washed his hands. He's already looking to retirement. So he, as you pointed out, he wants to, and others have pointed out that he wants to find $1 billion to establish his legacy. That's what he's focusing on. They basically have washed their hands of this, and they're doing nothing about it. And there is no leadership out of the White House.
Sure.
And this is what's the problem.
Well, I used to have a lot of insiders say, Alex, there are some conspiracies, there are combines, there are bad groups, but mainly it's ineptitude, laziness, and cronyism. And I think more and more that is what's happening, because you look at all the people they've got running the State Department now and ordering the Pentagon around. I've studied these people. I've read their writings. They know less than I do about geopolitics, and they're running things. This is dangerous.
Yeah, we're in trouble. We're in trouble right now, and it's going to take someone with a. We got to begin weaning from the Saudi, placating the Saudis, and really start hitting the financial flows where these people are getting their money from, and be able to deal with that and actually work with our allies to try and put a stop to it. Now, even the British and the French were involved with us in backing these jihadi groups when at a time when we were thinking of trying to overthrow Assad. We should.
Michael Maloof, do 5 more minutes with us. We're back in 70 seconds. I want you to be able to finish up and talk about your idea for solutions. Samantha Powers, all these people are playing general, and what's happening is the United States is getting played. And we've had a lot of generals, foreign leaders say the world's the most dangerous position it's probably ever been in. Meanwhile, Obama, remember, said that since he's been in, the world's the most stable it's ever been. And it's not about bashing Obama. I mean, as much as I didn't like Bill Clinton, geopolitically, he wasn't as bad as what we see now. F. Michael Maloof, we got about 4 minutes left in this segment. Other points you were making, and any other solutions that you think could somehow stop ISIS before they start attacking the West?
Well, we're actually going to have to increase intelligence and really focus overseas on intelligence gathering. But we've got to have people at the top who are willing to take actionable intelligence and act on it.
But the FBI's too busy watching the Tea Party.
Well, they've got to change that whole. You see, the whole mindset has got to change, because we do have a major threat. In addition, on the international side, we've got to start working with people that we don't regard as our buddies, but who are like-minded and wanting to counter terror, like the Russians, maybe even the Iranians, to try to deal with this. And now that the Saudis are now working with the Russians once again, perhaps we've got an unholy alliance here to try and deal with this problem. We're dealing with people who are rogues in many respects, whom we don't like politically, but we all have a common problem, and
Sure.
This really means getting our allies and even some of our adversaries together to work on this, to deal with this problem, because it is transnational. It's worldwide. It's out of control.
Doesn't it show how out of control it is that just 2 years ago we know Saudi Arabia was menacing Russia with its proxy jihad groups, these Wahhabist groups, and now it's spread so bad that they're working with Russia to try to put it out because they're even scared of it.
Absolutely, the tables have turned on them, and they're really fearful for their own existence at this point. And I think this is where I know it's not a popular thing to say, but we may have to work with the Iranians to deal with ISIS. They're the only ones who are really out there fighting them, along with, and we need to start arming the Peshmerga.
Well, sure. I mean, if the Iranians were invading all these countries and killing people, I'd say go to war with them. I mean, it's not like we're choosing any sides here. We've got these ISIS people are just, who really runs ISIS?
Well, it sounds like it's coming out of the White House, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We basically have supported them. We basically nurtured their existence. This is the problem that I see. We basically have allowed him to exist, and we gave them arms. We helped to create in their creation, and now they are on their own. And we got to do something about it. And we've got to work with allies and friends, even people that we would, on the surface, would not want to work with, but we're going to be compelled to work with because this problem is so ingrained.
F. Michael Maloof, writing for WND.com. Are there any other sites or documents that we should read other than your in-depth analysis at World Ed Daily? What are some other good things to look at?
Well, I do a survey of all things that I can come across, even weird websites. I even go on the Iranian website to see what they're saying, and also the Saudi website to see what they're saying, the Russian website. I see what the other people are saying, so that you know where they're coming from.
So read everything, but believe nothing.
Well, yeah, you got to read everything, and then you make your own judgment based upon that information. The other problem you got to watch out for will be the Turks, and I just leave that in closing because they are about ready to implode. And
let's have you back next week on the Nightly News if you can do it to talk about geopolitically what the destabilization of the Middle East means and what Turkey falling could do. Thank you, Mr. Maloof. We'll be back.
Thank you.
I'm just going to be completely honest, as I always am, teleprompter free, telling it like it is. I'm going to be completely honest with why I have Dr. David Duke, the former Ku Klux Klan Grand Dragon, joining us for the full hour into the next hour, if he will stay with us. I think it's best to start this interview, this debate, this discussion this way. I never had people like Dr. William Pierce or David Duke on the show because I did not want to have a Jerry Springer type program or Geraldo Rivera type program. If I just wanted ratings, I could be a shock jock and, be co-host with Howard Stern. I mean, literally, they've talked to me before about a slot on the Howard Stern show. That is not what I have attempted to do. And I thought bringing people on like David Duke would just stir people up. And I've always been trying to get people to transcend tribal, racial systems and to have a tribe of humans based on upward mobility, based on renaissance, based on promoting ideas of quality, based on systems of liberty and freedom and private property and free association. Because humans are tribal. Humans are based on clans, on families, on tribes, on groups. If you didn't have that tribal system, you would never have had the Greeks or the Romans or the Aztecs or the Shoguns. No one. You have the Chinese trying to invade the Japanese. You have the Japanese invading the Chinese. You have the South Koreans hating the North Koreans. You have one African tribe attacking the other African tribe because they're across the river. And mainly, if you read human or animal psychology, Conrad Lorenz, Desmond Morris, or any of the basic stuff, it's true. The more aggressive a mammal species, the more loving and sweet it is in the den. And so, in your tribe, you're not killing each other, you love each other. If someone does attack someone for no reason, the tribe will ostracize them or kill them. But you're a predator that preys on animals. Well, as humans' population got bigger 6,000 years ago, as we become agrarian, I'm going to go to Duke here in a moment. This is my preface. we began to wage war against each other. And to be able to go over the mountain and rob and kill the men and take the women, so much of conquest was about getting more women. Didn't matter if it was the Native Americans raiding settler villages to get their women and children, or whether it was the Romans doing it. It's the same human system. And you have to demonize who you're going to loot, who you're going to steal from, who you're going to overtake, who you're going to control. And that is a human condition. It's a human attribute from those primitive times. Is it an attribute in modern times? We are sold on the idea that we need to be colorblind, love everyone, be guilty, and pay all the taxes, accept the Obamacare, turn our guns in, or we're racist. And so the Christian Western ethic of transcending tribalism and having a tribe of love and helping others that is truly transcendent and altruistic, that was produced in the West, exported to the world, created modern civilization, and all the good things we have. 90% of it comes from Western culture. No one can debate that. And so the Christians promote the end of slavery, the end of serfdom in the last 300 years in Europe. It's ended worldwide except for areas of Africa and the Middle East where it still goes on and is cute and funny because it's not white people doing it. It's like when Muslims are, putting hoods on women's heads, radical Muslims, and chopping their genitals off. It's cute because it's their culture. Or when the Aztecs are chopping hearts out, it's not bad because it's a culture. But if whites have a crooked toenail, it's evil. Why is this being done? It's being done because Western culture is the dominant culture, and if you can dominate it, you dominate the world. And the eugenicists are targeting blacks, Hispanics, whites, everybody, but they're targeting whites with cultural guilt to accept the larger New World Order agenda. And I don't debate that. No one can. They're trying to ban the word master in colleges. Master's degrees, masters in golf, has nothing to do with slavery. It's about being able to erase words and create a new dark age of ignorance. Headline Infowars.com. Yale professor, students leaving campus over racist word master. Infowars.com today. Biggest gay lobby group in America urges schools to ban the words boy and girl, saying it's hateful. See, normal human biology is under attack. This is a scientific takeover. So yes, there's a war on white people. But the very same liberal Ford Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation technocrats that are doing this funded Planned Parenthood, funded the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, funded the Ku Klux Klan, and created the world we see today. And that's what I'm saying. It's a spectrum where the New World Order controls all the sides, keeps us tribal, wages war against the black community, from 15% illegitimacy to 87% illegitimacy, from 5% in prison to 78% in prison. I mean, and what they've practiced on the blacks, they're doing to everybody. So I'm going to give, and I'm going to skip this network break coming up. I'm going to give Duke the floor here because I've had my 5-6 minutes. I have no idea what he's going to say what he has to say, but here's what I'm getting at. The political correctness is such an open cult of ending freedom, of ending true liberalism, of ending free speech, and creating class warfare, infusing racial consciousness into class warfare, and whipping up giant exported populations to break and further destroy the West in an act of genocide against the ideas of the West. That the reason I would have a David Duke on is not that I agree with what he overall is doing, but because he is the mirror image of the spectrum that's promoted by Mecha, La Raza, the black supremacist groups, and all the rest of it. And so he should have a show on MSNBC right next to Al Sharpton because they are two people basically promoting the same thing at the end of the day. And he may disagree with that. I don't think David Duke believes what he's doing is bad in the final equation. He believes he's a hero, a white knight on shining armor, fighting against the globalist cultural jihad or corporate overwrite of civilization. And undoubtedly that is happening. But I see humanity being paved over by the Hollywood culture of death across the board. I see blacks targeted by the left who I have been around privately when they say we hate black people. So there's a paradox here where the truth is the left needs David Duke to point at so that they don't actually get the scrutiny and people actually realize these people are 1,000 times, if you believe David Duke is wicked, 1,000 times more wicked than he is. Now, David, we'll do the whole next hour, too, if you want, so we can each have 5, 6, 7 minutes at a turn here going over this, but that's where I come from here, and that's where this world is going. I want to get people outside the box to see the prison economy, how they've divided us into different groups to play the part of the referee. So David Duke of DavidDuke.com joins us. If you want me to do your bio, I think everybody knows you're a doctor, PhD in history, authored a bunch of best-selling books, and been a Grand Dragon Wizard, and all the rest of it. I'm not going to start making jokes about that, but thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope we can have a good debate here.
Well, I hope so. And if you give me a chance to talk, that'll be great. And I look forward to a real discussion about some of the basic issues, because I would like to get down to the bottom today about who the real elite is in this country and in the world that is truly, as you say, and it's totally true, they're an enemy of all mankind. And I think for them, and you even said this as well in the first part of the show, you said they want to, in some ways, go against European peoples because they want to control the West and the power of the West. And I think that's why we're in these wars in the Middle East, really wars for Israel and wars for the globalist powers. But I'm not a carbon copy or a mirror image of Al Sharpton. The truth is that there is a racism that dominates America, supremacism. But it's racism, vicious hate propaganda and racism against the European American. And as far as eugenics, or as far as limiting births, the real population explosion, black people have a much higher birth rate than whites. Mexicans have a much higher birth rate than even African Americans. European Americans have about a 1.6 birth rate, which means we're losing a quarter of our people every generation. The population explosion in the world is an African explosion. The United Nations just recently put out a statistic showing that in Africa by 2050, there'll be 1.3 billion Africans. And that's almost entirely because of the massive birth rate. So I don't believe that these globalists are intentionally trying to limit the birth rates of Africans or African Americans or whatever. The truth is that the only people on the planet who are losing their numbers, and of course it's only white nations that are being massively invaded by immigration, which the globalists and the Zionists have set up and dominated in the United States, Canada, Australia. Every European nation today is under attack. And I believe that's because our people don't any longer have control over the media. They have no longer control over the banking system, the Federal Reserve Bank. They no longer have control over our foreign policy or even our politics. The biggest contributors in politics are absolutely Zionists, and I can prove that and document that. And the Federal Reserve, we've had 3 decades now. A Federal Reserve chairman. In fact, I have a graphic that I uploaded to your site today. Hopefully your engineer can put it up with the Federal Reserve, the Fed. And over the last 3 decades, every Federal Reserve chairman and vice chairman has been a Jewish supremacist, a Jewish Zionist. There's no argument about that. Not a single non-Jewish head of the Federal Reserve banking system, and that is the ultimate banking power in the world. You want to talk about international finance? There's no more powerful force in the world than the Federal Reserve. Now, these are all Jewish activists. I don't say every Jew, and I agree with you, that not every Jew is acting against European Americans or against people of the world. But we do know that Zionism is absolutely a Jewish supremacist phenomenon. It is a racist phenomenon. They kicked 600,000 people out of their land, stole their land, have violated them, murdered them, tortured them, periodically killed thousands of women and children, maimed them in Israel, and they are the power. But for them to have the power, Israel wouldn't exist, and the Jewish supremacism wouldn't exist, except for the fact that the Jews basically have And I believe this. They've taken over the American elite. Now, when I say this is another graphic that I've had uploaded already. I'll show you a graphic from the New York Times. Mr. Brooks, David Brooks, one of their leading columnists, in which he literally talks about an article or a thing called The Chosen getting in. And he literally speaks about a Jewish taking over for the American elite and how the Jews have become the American elite. So if you want to talk about the elite in this country, I believe they are tribalists. And I'm not a mirror image of Al Sharpton, because I believe it's my people that are going to become a minority in the world. Now, I respect all people. And if I were President of the United States, I wouldn't be having this globalist agenda. And I certainly wouldn't be invading these countries in these wars for Israel and Iraq and Afghanistan. I certainly wouldn't be supporting the Goldman Sachs of the world. That's the biggest predator, the most evil predator international bank in the world. It is a Zionist institution, and it not only controls international banking, or has a great effect of it, it literally picks who's going to be in our Treasury Department, basically, and the people with the power in the Federal Reserve. It is a Zionist operation, and it's also the chief corporate contributor. Take a look at the Goldman Sachs, again, what I've showed you. It's the chief corporate contributor of both Democrats and Republicans in the United States of
David,
America.
I won't debate you there. I'll just interject for 1 minute, then you can come back for 2 minutes, then we'll continue.
Sure.
Let me just interject. When I say mirror image, I meant from his perspective, he promotes all the race-based stuff. From your white perspective, that's going on. And I'm saying the rhetoric out of Mecha, La Raza means the race. You promote stuff that's race-based. And so that's what I'm trying to get at here. And when I talk about eugenics, Margaret Sanger, Planned Parenthood, was set up, in her words, I can pull up her letters if you want, saying that it was to target black people. 52% of black people are never born in this country. I know there's giant third world explosions going on in Africa. That's two separate things. I was saying, and I'm not saying the eugenicists are being totally successful or totally in control. I was getting at, how do you square Margaret Sanger, Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, awards to Hitler, getting awards from Hitler, pen pals, the left loves her, and I'm saying the left is really a bunch of shadow, control freak, ultimate racist who've gone in and taken over the black community as a beta test and ruined it and pushed every weaponized media form you can imagine and the whole gangster culture. I mean, who can doubt that paying women not to have men in the house literally destroyed the black community as we know it compared to what it was?
But there's nobody in America that has talked about that more than I have. I
was unaware of that. I don't follow a lot of what you have to say, so I thought, since you see snippets on the news, we'd have you on. But, I mean, how do you respond to that?
Well, I respond this way, that I've talked against that. I really believe, and I truly believe, that blacks, as whites, are victims of this Zio control over our media. It's an incredibly destructive culture. They push drugs on our kids. We've seen the black family totally devastated over the last 4 or 5 decades, and that's because of the change of the culture. But who runs Hollywood? It's not European American Christians, my friend. Every one of the 10 largest Hollywood studios of movies and television are all Jewish controlled. I can give you the names. We have a graphic here of Jewish pundits, like at the Los Angeles Times, who is in the middle of Hollywood, where he boasts that Jews totally run Hollywood. In the article, he lists all the leaders of the Hollywood networks, and he says he's insulted when people try to argue, or when even Jews argue that Jews don't control Hollywood. He's proud of it, and he goes on to say, I don't care if people think we're running the Federal Reserve, international banking, Wall Street, the media, and government. All I care is we keep on running them. Now, this is what they say. I'm quoting what they say, so they call me anti-Semitic. I don't believe I'm anti-Semitic. I believe I am for the rights of all people, including the European people. Now, what's going on in this country? And Donald Trump's talking about it, and that's why he's got so much popularity.
That was my next question. What do you think of Donald Trump?
Well, I don't know if I can trust him, because he's been involved with the Zionists, and he's one of these guys in the Republican debate. We got to control media. Even Fox News is like a controlled opposition. Orwell was so great about that. And Orwell talked about the controlled opposition, and in his great book, he talks about the controlled opposition. For some reason, he named the controlled opposition Emmanuel Goldstein, using 2 Jewish names. And I think that the Jewish extremists can set up a controlled opposition. And if you saw the debate, it was like an ambush and against Donald Trump. And it was because he was talking about the fact that European Americans are losing the right. The people who built this great country and gave us the foundations of our Bill of Rights, all the things you believe about are being replaced. And here's the problem. I believe in having a kind nation toward all people, supporting all people. I am not for any sort of exploitation. I'll give you an example. The media is so powerful, they can just make name monikers. I have never, ever been a white supremacist. I believe in equal rights for all people. I've always stated that position, even back in my Klan days. I was a young man who back in the 1960s, as a young teen, I began to realize that European Americans were going to be a minority in this country. Everybody else, when I talked about that, they said, oh, that's baloney. That's never going to happen. And we're seeing it right now. We are slated to be a minority. Biden tells these ambassadors from South America we're going to be a minority. How great it is. We're going to be a minority. This is a part of the Jewish divide and conquer strategy, and it is a tribal thing. I don't think there's nothing wrong with a Jew or any other people on the planet, African American or Mexican American, anybody to be ashamed of their heritage or not proud of their heritage. You want to preserve it. That is a very natural, healthy thing. But there is something wrong with people who are trying to destroy other peoples and exploit other peoples. And that's really what's going on in this country.
Well, I want to get your views on that, because you say you're not a white supremacist. What is your view of Adolf Hitler? Because I have, not even in mainline history books, but the Nuremberg trials and a lot of German writings as well. I mean, the Nazis really were a weird death cult. They really were into all sorts of weird ceremonial magic. They really did think Hitler was God. I mean, I really genuinely, and I know there's two sides to World War II, but the West funded the rise of Hitler. The West signed a secret treaty that's been basically released by the British to back Hitler in a takeover of Europe. They had Edward VIII ready to be the new king of Europe. They double-crossed, but that doesn't mean Hitler's good. It means, see, again, the West, England, British intelligence, along with some of the U.S., was setting things up. I mean, take Prescott Bush, the head Nazi agent in the U.S., and they're planning for a coup with Smedley Butler. I mean, there's all this other stuff going on.
Not engaging in the United States at all. I think this is, I'm sorry, but I believe that the information you have there is false. And maybe it's planted by the people as misinformation. The truth is that there's no evidence at all that Western nations supported the rise of Hitler or any of the Gentile establishment in America.
He was on the cover of Time magazine. My grandfather remembered hearing him in Dallas. They would air it on the radio.
Not promote Adolf Hitler. And if you look at the New York Times and our media in America, even back then, the New York Times was dominant. Our Jewish publication, the Schultzbergers, had article after article every day of our lives about how evil the Germans, with a lot of lies about the Germans too. The fact is that there was no greater, the International saw no greater enemy than Germany in the Second World War, and both the Zionists on one side, Zionist Jews on one side, which influenced the West, as Charles Lindbergh pointed out, and communist Jews on the other side supported Marxism. We knew.
So just everything is Jews' fault. You really believe that?
It's not Jews' fault, but you got to understand they have a complete domination of our media, our academia. They have
all right, David Duke's our guest. If you just tuned in, we're going to come back and let you hear from him. This is unfiltered, uncensored. It's live, and we're going to really start getting into the meat and potatoes. You know, we should open the phones up some in the next hour if David Duke stays with us, so you can call in. People that disagree with him, people that agree with him. I've just tried to stay out of all this stuff over the years, just try to promote free market, lower taxes, school choice, sovereignty, so that people can make their own decisions. But it's clear the ruling elite in the West, whoever they are, it's a mix of groups, are pushing weaponized media where they now say the word boy and girl is hateful, ban it in schools. And it's happening. And I saw a public gender-neutral bathroom yesterday. And I had my daughters with me, and we couldn't use it. And I talked to my daughters about it, and they said, yeah, we don't want to go in there with other men. And I was talking to a lady about it last night. She goes, yeah, I ran into one of those now, and You go in there and there's men in the bathroom, and and there's guys at urinals right beside you. You know, all cultures, men and women, stay separate for a reason. That's just the way it's always been. This is an attempt. What I'm saying is it's beyond what David Duke's saying, and people freak out about what he says. It's just milquetoast compared to what MTV promotes. I mean, look at these headlines. Yale professor, students leaving campus over racist word master. Educator calls for ban of the word. The racial and gender weight it carries. It's about controlling words. Biggest gay lobby group in America urges schools to ban the words boy and girl. Danish politician convicted for racism for offending Muslims. Blood money. Planned Parenthood has politicians completely paid off. Media in its pocket. California Green Party promotes free swaps for straight white men. I mean, this is just a bunch of people organizing their own weird tribes, freaking out over their sexual preference. I mean, this is society in decline. School told to call kids purple penguins because boys and girls is not inclusive to transgender. Nebraska school bans the term boys and girls to train teachers to avoid gender expressions. I mean, this is a cult where they can tell you what to believe, what to sing, and how to talk, and arrest you if you don't do it. These are totalitarians. And it's anti-human. And it's out of control. Let's say the government sets me up like they did David Duke. And I don't agree with a lot of what David Duke has to say, but I remember looking at his case in the news when it happened and knowing the IRS claimed that he had a tax exemption that shouldn't be tax exempt for his group, which they're supposed to just issue the tax exemption for a political organization or cultural organization, and they put him in jail for years. And now they're putting tens of thousands of conservatives, libertarians. See, first they came for the Grand Dragons. And then they came for the pro-gun groups. Then they came for the veterans groups. That didn't stand up, so then they came for your property rights group. And the emails have come out that Lois Lerner is targeting conservatives, libertarians. So the point is, if I got thrown in prison, they would say, you're going to the white area. Even if I wasn't racist against Hispanics and blacks, I'm inherently don't know who they are individually. Doesn't matter. They've been put in racial groups and have been turned into racially based organizations by the government, by design. And I think that's what I'm saying that transcends all this. Whoever the ruling elite are, and there's different power groups, they are using divide and conquer clearly to control. Don't we need to point out that the left is promoting racism and division, and then not go join our own racial groups to play into their game, but transcend it and try to come together? Because they're in a race to balkanize us. That's what the elite wants. And economically, even if you want to segregate yourself, they're going to try to not let you do it. So I'm simply here really trying to have sophisticated thought. I'm not saying David Duke isn't sophisticated. I've just heard all this over and over again. And I've also experienced at the hands of the anti-Mason groups, the anti-Catholic groups, the anti-Jew groups, where they give just godlike superpowers to whoever they believe runs everything. And so, therefore, I'm Jewish because I've been successful, or I'm only successful because Jews tell me what to do and I'm on the hotline to Tel Aviv. You know, there's no discussion of there's a bunch of diverse Jewish organizations and groups, different types of Jews, leftist Jews, right-wing Jews, Jews that criticize Israel, Jews that don't. It just all becomes one big monolithic thing. And so I really am trying to figure out what's happening here. David Duke is our guest. I've talked for about 4 minutes here. I'm going to throw it back to him so that folks, see where he's coming from. All I'm saying is David Duke isn't taking over. Leftist organizations, whoever runs them, are fantastical in what they push now. I don't want to turn my guns in. I'm deeply racist. I'm against Obamacare. That's a screw job written by offshore insurance companies. I'm racist. I mean, this has been said on CNN and MSNBC. No proof. So it doesn't matter. They have successfully radicalized and racially based their movements. they're going with it. And I see the Democratic Party, who failed when Republicans passed the Civil Rights Act and the rest of it, who flipped and then began racially catering to minorities, running a Klan strategy, but now it's through minorities and successfully doing so. So what happens? Americans then racially divide, and then the government can then basically turn us all into a giant prison and divide and conquer us. That's where I see this going. It doesn't mean we should accept saying whites are inherently evil and should be exterminated. It doesn't mean we don't sit there and give up any white culture we have. And no, we speak out against all those attacks. But then do we go suit up in pointed hats at the end of the day? What does that do? And then he didn't answer the question. I want you to answer this. I'll give you the floor for 10 minutes, David. And I want you to answer this question. You keep acting like there's no connection to Planned Parenthood and white supremacy and exterminist operations. That is going on. So how do you square up that behind the scenes, the Democratic Party are, a fellow Grand Dragon, Senator Byrd. The left accepts and loves him. They don't accept and love you. There's something else going on here is what I'm getting at. Go ahead.
Well, I'm glad you're giving me 10 minutes. I hope you hold to that, because you didn't speak even over that. That's okay. And I'll be happy to go.
No, I just spoke 6.5 minutes. Go ahead.
I got you, whatever. My clock's different. That's okay.
Well, it was a break. 3.5 minute break.
Oh, that's right. Whatever. But the point is that, and we can go into this. I'll go to the end of the program the next hour or two, because you're right. I feel like it's the only way I can really get a clear exposition of all my positions. But here's the issue about that. First off, the KKK was not the author of any sort of Planned Parenthood. What I did, and I was in the House of Representatives. By the way, let me make something really clear to you, so there's no misunderstanding. Not only have I spoken and been completely opposed to abortion, I also put my money where my mouth is. In the House of Representatives, I voted for the strongest anti-abortion law that's ever been passed by a legislative body in the United States of America. So it's really clear what I stand for.
Well, good job.
Well, that's exactly right. But again, it shows you the misconceptions people might have. Now, here is the point, though. I served in the Health and Welfare Committee, and I do believe that massive welfare illegitimacy is something that damages black people and damages the taxpayer. We have many married couples who can't afford to have kids because of this horrific tax program and because a lot of these so-called social welfare programs going on. And when I was in the legislature, I said that I don't think this is proper, and that we educate African Americans or anybody else. It wasn't based on race. But if you go in the social welfare system, that you should be encouraged to abstain, and if you can't abstain, you should be responsible. If you have children in this system that you're in, it lessens your opportunity for education, your opportunity for advancement, and that's what we have. We have a repeating cycle of poverty in America. It's true, and it's damaging everybody. And as I said, there's no problem with black birth rates in America. There's no problem with Mexican American birth rates in America. There is a problem with white birth rates in America, and one of the reasons why is because we have this denigrated society. A lot of white people say, "I don't want to bring a kid in this world," and also they have all sorts of economic hurdles to ride through to be able to have a child today. Whereas the welfare recipient, even though I don't know if it's necessarily true, sees one more illegitimate child as a path to greater benefits, bigger apartments, welfare apartments, more direct payments, more food stamps, that type of thing. I don't think it really helps them overall, but they see that bigger check, and it's literally an incentive. So I said that to qualify for welfare, we should at least try to counsel any person on welfare, especially those who are not married and who are reproducing these kids without a loving present father, that we should encourage them to either abstain, that's the best thing, or to practice some sort of responsibility and not bring children to this environment that lessens their opportunity and makes those children that are born have a greater sense. The reason why we spend $2 trillion in the welfare system in America. I've just done a complete report on that. By the way, people can go to davidduke.com. I have a massive archive on this. They can look up these issues, and they can read about all these issues, including all of what I'm saying about Jewish racism and tribalism, and that's the real supremacy on planet Earth, really. But the fact is, I've just done a big report on we spent $2 trillion in the so-called war on poverty, and we got more poverty than ever. We got more crime than ever. We got millions of people on drugs. We're not solving these issues. So it's not any sort of genocide to urge people to be responsible. And that's what I did when I was in the legislature. I urged that. Of course, I was condemned, naturally. But the people who are committing the genocide in America, in terms of the Planned Parenthood meeting lessening birth, the people being genocided in Europe, and this is the fundamental thing that I hope you understand, Mr. Jones, and I understand. The people being genocided are the European people. Our birth rate now is 1.6 per couple. I mean, even two doesn't really take care of the people that die and don't have able to reproduce or whatever.
We need 2.1.
Our people, give me my 10 minutes, please. It's certainly, this is one form of people being lost. I believe this is also a pattern of the promotion. You talked about all this promotion. It's a good example of this sexual degeneracy and the lesbian, gay agenda and so forth. I can show you, I can prove it to anybody's satisfaction. It is totally, practically totally, it is 98% dominated and controlled by Jewish extremists. And by the way, they support Israel. These same extremists support Israel, which doesn't even allow a marriage between a man and a man, or a woman and a woman. They don't allow in Israel, but every major Jewish organization in America, you can go to the Council of Presidents of major Jewish organizations, which is a real organization, has a budget of billions of dollars, all these groups. That group puts a policy, and they support gay marriage. They support gun control of the American people. We talked about that earlier in the show, another show I listened to a while back, that the Israelis were promoting gun control for America. They support gun control. This is every major Jewish organization in the United States of America. So we have a tremendous double standard. And I ask you why. I ask, why is it that there is this worldwide campaign of hatred and viciousness against Europeans? I have another graphic, which we can show you. Show a couple. Let me show another graphic here. This is from the movie Django, which is produced by the Weinstein brothers. And this is a perfect example of what's going on in this country and the vicious racism that's going on. This is a quotation from the movie Django, which has the black hero. It shows black people. By the way, every Native American is an evil son of a gun in this movie. And they show black people suffering and suffering. Take a look at that clip again, the image. The quotation is, the black hero in the movie, for people to admire, goes on, kill white people and get paid for it. What's not to like? My God. Now, this is produced by the Weinstein brothers. And it's not just the Weinstein brothers. It's literally almost every major Jewish studio. Constantly, they're talking about white slavery. You know, Mr. Jones, for instance, that in the world, Jews are less than 1/10 of 1% of the population of the world. Do you know that their own historians boast about the fact that they have controlled and dominated the slave trade, the worldwide slave trade, for 2,000 years? In Encyclopedia Britannica, in fact, Marcus, who's one of their chief historians, literally says that the Jews controlled the slavery. They enslaved millions of Europeans over the years. They actually even worked with some of the corsairs in North Africa, which went and captured Europeans, and they were the biggest slave traders even in Muslim countries. They ran the triangular slave trade. There's no argument about it. I can show you in Jewish publications about this. Now, they're the world champions of slavery. But what does our Jewish-controlled media try to do? They try to create guilt for white people about slavery. When the truth is, in America, for instance, under the American Union, we had slavery for what, 90 years or something like that? Less than that even, okay? And the Jews have been being the chief slave traders in the history of the world. The Old Testament says it in Leviticus, where they literally say, you can't enslave your fellow Jews, but non-Jews, you can enslave and you can treat harshly. Now, if they have the guts to try to criticize white people for 100 years of slavery in the United States of America, they better be the first ones to condemn themselves. But they don't do that. The truth is that every nation on earth has had slavery. Every people has enslaved others. Every people has been imperialist. I don't endorse that. I think slavery is wrong and horrible, and I don't believe even in imperialism. I think every people have a right to be free. But the truth is, to condemn European Americans for their role in slavery for a few hundred years is ridiculous, because then you'd have to condemn every nation and the heroes of most of the nations on the planet Earth. So we have a complete double standard. What we're having in this country is there is a campaign to make European Americans a minority in this country, a minority in Canada, a minority in Australia, a minority in France, a minority in Germany, a minority in the UK, a minority in Sweden, little countries that are so beautiful in their traditions. This is a massive crime against humanity. And I am not being racist because I'm defensive of the things that I love. I love my people. I love my heritage. I know that, European Americans created the United States of America. They wrote our Constitution. They gave us our Bill of Rights, including our Second Amendment rights. And you know, and I know, that if America becomes a minority nation, you think you're going to keep your guns out there? People who are listening to me right now, you know you're not going to keep your guns, because every major organization of these other groups, like the NAACP, like the Razi and Ida, the Jewish groups, all those groups support confiscation of your guns. The demographics of the United States of America and of Europe, to me, is the most important human rights issue in the world. And because of those demographics, because the European American elite in a 90% European country, it's normal to have Europeans being the elite of a 90% country populated by their own. To overthrow that elite, they had to put out this hate propaganda, this self-hate propaganda, and they had to incite the minorities against those Europeans who defended themselves, like myself. I got over 60% of the European American vote in Louisiana, twice, the U.S. Senate, for the governorship of my state. The people knew I wasn't a racist. They knew that I was a decent person. I believed in civil rights and human rights. But the way they beat me was by inciting hatred in the minorities to get a black bloc vote out there. That's what's really going on in this country, and that's what they're using. That's why they're trying to empower this change in America. It's a divide and conquer strategy. In that way, you're very correct. But who's dividing and conquering? If it was really just a question of being against everybody, why would they go only against European Americans, and why would they support? I'll give you one last example. I guess I got 1 minute left on my 10. I'll give you another example. The SPLC, which is a Jewish-run organization, Mr. Cohen, a very anti-white organization, and Mr. Potok are the two major figures of the organization. They condemn me because I want to preserve, my heritage, my way of life, my traditions, even the way my children and grandchildren will look someday and the values that they have, right? Well, they condemn us during the time when we had the Steve Scalise controversy, when you had the congressman who came to one of my meetings. During that time, they criticized him for simply going to a meeting of European Americans, right? So, but here you have you have Schultz Wasserman, right? A Jewish congresswoman who gave a big speech at an international women's group condemning Jewish intermarriage with non-Jews. And by the way, they don't use simply a religious qualification for that. They use that in a racial sense. In Israel, a Jew can marry another Jew who is non-religious, who hates religion, who is a communist or whatever. Anybody, but the final determinant in Israel, whether you can get married, is not whether you're Jew by religion, but whether you're Jew by race. So tell me, Alex, how in the world do we have really a fair playing field in this country when the same media that promotes the Jewish state of Israel is doing everything they can to destroy European Americans being a majority and really preserving our European American...
Okay. Now listen, that's 10 minutes, and I talked to 7 earlier. Coming up the next hour, I can't skip any more of these breaks, which I've been doing, and so we're going to have to go a couple minutes here, a couple minutes there, take some phone calls, do some stuff like that. And I'm not criticizing you here, but the little debate tactic of constantly implying I'm not letting you talk. You've talked more than I have this hour, unless you count the ads as my time, and that's not my time. Those are ads on radio. So you're being able to make your points. You're not being censored. You're not being stopped. And so that's not a fair debating tactic to keep implying you're getting cut off. I'm not trying to be negative here. I'm trying to be nice.
More time than O'Reilly, that's for sure.
Sure, exactly. Well, there's always this criticism that I'm cutting people off. The truth is, I let guests talk more than other shows. I might kind of rudely interject because I get excited and want to say something. I'm not polished. I don't want to be polished. So I think you've been making your points there.
Okay.
I've got to talk about a sponsor here for a moment, but then when we come back, here's what I'm getting. I know a ton of Jews who are against globalism, against tyranny, who just want freedom, who are involved in all sorts of, really good things, promoting freedom. And then I constantly see these examples, these charts that are put together to say that, it's Jews, period. I think you could say there's leftist Jews who are, and socialist-leaning Jews who have to be super rich, who are at the core of promoting socialism and communism. I mean, I've seen Jewish leaders on C-SPAN say, Judaism is communism. Well, then I've studied the different flavors of Judaism, like I've looked at other religions, that's not even the case. So there is a lot of this stuff going on. I think there's some oversimplifying here happening. So I'm going to make a statement when we come back and then get your take on that. Briefly, if you just tuned in, I'm Alex Jones. This is an interview, debate with Dr. David Duke. We're going to be having black supremacists on, Hispanic supremacists on. The problem is we've invited them on, they won't come on. So David Duke did come on the show, and I think it's thought-provoking, and that's what we're here to do, is get beyond political correctness. Because in political correctness, it's okay for Wolf Blitzer or somebody like a CIA operative Anderson Cooper to interview David Duke, but then I've noticed if talk radio shows have him on and even criticizing, they go, look, this talk show host who's conservative had David Duke on, he must be with him. Or, look, they use the word master's degree, that's code word for masters in slavery. Or brown bags in Seattle means you don't like black people. So there's this hyper obsession with all of this, and I think it's important just to get it all out in the open, suss it out, debate it. Here's what I'm saying. The West is having 1.3 in Europe on average. It is 1.6 in the U.S. Global average is about 1.5. Japan has 1.2, 1.3. They're industrialized. They're not having kids because of the wealth. That's the syndrome. The selfishness of wealth. I'm not knocking wealth, it's just that's a fact. So I don't think that's a targeted thing that's happening. I do think people in the West should have kids. I mean, I don't want there to be no more Europeans. I think that's a sad thing. I wouldn't want to say, no, let's get rid of all the Africans either. I'd be sad if Africans were dying. I like human population. I want to go to space. So that's my statement on that front. I'm trying to transcend just the debate of tribalism, because when you're being attacked tribally, it makes sense to be racially based. I get it. Whether you're Hispanic, black, white, Asian, whatever. The point is, couldn't we come together for free market and freedom? Why does it have to be if America becomes a majority, minority country that we will lose the guns? With the social demographics of Latin American voters, they tend to be socialist or communist. Yes, the guns will be taken. I want to reach out to those folks. Because I've been able to wake up people that are Hispanic or black. I have a lot of Hispanic and black listeners that are really awake and get what's happening and are good people. So, I just want to wake everybody up. I want everybody to succeed. I want everybody to either keep their culture, mix cultures, don't, whatever you want to do. I'm a libertarian. That's what I'm getting at. We're going to go to break, come back, have David's response for a short 5-minute segment, then come back again, and I'm going to get into a bunch of questions that I've got for him here. I also want to talk about his take on the IRS, because he is a political prisoner. I mean, they really did target him. You can say, good, throw him in jail. Well, you're a tyrant then, because it could be you next. So that's all coming up. By the way, we mentioned we have the best colloidal silver, 30 parts per million, $19.95. It helps fund our operation at InfoWarsLife.com. We have two specials. They corrected me. We have 30% off one bottle, or buy two, get two free at InfoWarsLife.com, or by calling toll-free 888-253-3139. If you don't know the benefits and what colloidal silver can do, go to InfoWarsLife.com, click on the silver bullet tab and read about it. Superbell Vitality's back in. Brain Force is almost sold out. We've got a lot of great books, films, you name it. Your purchases fund the good guys in an open, free speech college of ideas that our colleges used to be. Now they're barren, sterile, politically correct, mentally ill institutions of brainwashing. Stay with us, third hour, straight ahead. Well, David Duke, the PhD in history and former Grand Wizard or Grand Dragon, Grand Cyclops. I'm sorry, I think that's so funny. David Duke, I'm going to give you the floor here for the next 4 or 5 minutes. minutes. We're going to go to break, come back, get into a whole bunch of questions, other issues you want to cover, where you think the world's going, the economy. But explain to me, and I mean this seriously, where did all this dragon, goblin, cyclops stuff come from? And were you a goblin cyclops before you were a dragon?
No, never was a goblin, never was a cyclops. But I am a European American who realized at a very young age that we were going to become minoritized in our own nation, that we were going to lose our rights or privileges, including our gun rights. And I've seen a lot of destruction of those rights over the years, and they're going to continue to go. And as our country goes, and as the power of the media goes to brainwash our people and to degenerate our people, that's going to continue. And I was a young man who I saw this writing on the wall. I didn't win any popularity contest by joining a nonviolent Klan organization, and I thought I could recover the image because originally the Klan, as many Americans said, looked north and south, restored the freedom, really, of the Southern people and the decency of what's going on in the South in a very horrible Reconstruction period where European Americans in the South were stripped of all their voting rights. And they were done so without any due process. I think the war between the states, for instance, was not a civil war, that the South was fighting for the same principle of freedom and independence, the North fought for, and in fact the North understood this principle. Robert E. Lee's statue is in the Hall of Heroes in the United States Capitol building. Even Jefferson Davis, the first head of the Confederacy. Americans always respected and loved Robert E. Lee. Today he's being called the traitor. He wasn't a traitor. He's a traitor. Then Thomas Jefferson was a traitor. George Washington was a traitor. And the attack on Southern heritage is nothing more than an attack on entire European heritage. Because now they're talking about taking down statues of Thomas Jefferson who gave us our rights. They talk about taking George Washington's name off public schools. They did that in New Orleans, saying that he was unworthy because he had slaves. Well, half of the great heroes of the entire third world were slaveholders, including an awful lot of Jewish heroes were slaveholders. Just read about Jewish history. The hypocrisy is unbelievable in this country.
Well, that's certainly true. Let me interject this.
Oh, you said okay, I'll interject.
But now this is how we're going into discussion. I remember even a Washington Post article about a whole bunch of the leaders of the South were actually Jewish. You're not mentioning those leaders. Go ahead.
I think not being aware of Jewish tribalism, racism, that's been in existence in this world for so long is part of our downfall. I think Judah E. Benjamin, for instance, who was a treasurer in the South, just like there are a lot of Jews involved in the North as well. I think he basically ripped off the Southern Confederacy. He was in charge of taking the money to safehold in Great Britain and other places, and he stole. I think he was an extremely damaging element in the South, and the South might have won the war if not for Judah E. Benjamin. We see this historically, time after time after time. There's no more intensive racism or supremacism than among Jews. The Jewish Talmud, the chief Sephardic rabbi of Israel, and this is a fact. The chief Sephardic rabbi of Israel was Rabbi Yosef. He was in coalition with Netanyahu. He literally got on the radio in Israel. He made a statement that the only purpose of non-Jews, Gentiles on earth, was to serve Jews. That Gentiles were meant to work and bind and seethe and dig, and Jews were meant to sit and eat. He compared people like yourself and myself, other Gentiles around the world, black people as well, anybody who's not a Jew, with a donkey. Oh, we want our Gentiles to have a long life, just like we want our donkey to have a long life so they can serve the Jew. Now, those are his words. Now, this was not some sort of extreme, strange Jew somewhere in Israel. This guy was in coalition with Netanyahu in the government, and when he died, Joseph had the biggest funeral in the history of the state of Israel.
All right, David Duke's our guest. We're debating. So David Duke is basically saying to a great extent there's a worldwide Jewish conspiracy that's behind the New World Order to push these agendas. And so then I would ask the question, would civilization have any problems if the Jews were all sent in a space capsule to another planet? And I'm going to ask him that question in a moment. In fact, I want to go through a bunch of questions for David Duke. and then he can spend a few minutes here and there in this hour on his views about the different topics he's covering. And it's fine, David. People can go to davidduke.com and see your videos and your talking points and the things you talk about. And I've heard most of this from other people of your ilk. I'm really trying to understand, though, your worldview on things and where you see things going. Before we go any further, I have a book here written by Paul R. Ehrlich, Ann H. Ehrlich, John P. Holdren, and I think those folks are Gentiles. One of them's the White House Science Czar, Population, Resources, Environment. They talk about putting fluoride in the water to reduce fertility of everybody and to reduce IQ. And I guess you might think I'm a conspiracy theorist for talking about that. Here's Harvard, impact of fluoride on neurological development in children, massive IQ reductions. So that's Reuters. What do you think about water fluoridation? Because I just never hear the white nationalists worried about that. And, I don't want black babies, white babies, Hispanic babies, anybody having their IQ lowered 15, 20 points, having bone cancer. Autism was 1 in 25,000 30 years ago. Now it's 1 in 56. It's set by 2025. CDC says to be 1 in 3. Something's going on here. And I see it as a eugenics operation, and I have the documents. And when I study the eugenicist, it comes out of the British royalty funding in the 1850s, the movement that created biometrics and computers and our whole world. And I see Thomas Watson and his Hallworth machines and Hitler. And I'm not saying it's a Nazi conspiracy or a white supremacist conspiracy. I'm saying it's a scientific cult conspiracy.
I'm the sucker, I know, I realize it.